Calamities like the recent earthquakes in Turkey and Syria erupt into our lives and have us staring in disbelief at the unfolding horror. Aware that we are unable to help in any meaningful way ourselves, we instead reach for our mobile wallets or think of what's lurking in the attic or basement that we could donate. But we hesitate, not quite sure what is most needed, who is most deserving, or who will spend our money most wisely. I get questions like this from students, colleagues, and friends all the time. Hello, and welcome to my short vlog on Where Does Your Money Go? My name is James Shepherd-Barron. I'm a disaster risk management consultant and founder of disasterwise.org, an online platform for people interested in the myths, maths, and management of mayhem. So here are 3 things to think about how disaster responses are funded, followed by one recommendation at the end. The 3 key messages, as you can see, are pretty brutal. The first is that you're already paying for the response, so why are you paying again? Second is that most material donations of stuff are inappropriate. And the third is at least half of your donation, probably more, will never reach the intended beneficiary. Let's look at these in a bit more detail. So, as I said, the first thing to realize is that by the time you're aware that a disaster is unfolding somewhere around the world, you're already paying for the response. Most people I talk to don't seem to realize this. Trained UN disaster assessment and coordination teams, UNDAC teams as they're known, at least one of which is on permanent standby at any moment in time, will already be in the air on their way for mass casualty events like the Turkey-Syria earthquake, INSARAG search and rescue, and EMT emergency medical teams, all of which are government funded, will already be mobilizing. So the thing to consider while all this is going on is, who do you want to give extra money to? The first are the United Nations. Most UN agencies exist with voluntary contributions. The vast majority of these come from member state governments, i.e. from your taxes, from this 0.7% we hear so much about in the UK. Despite appeals from organisations like UNICEF and the World Food Programme, there is really no need to give them more, unless you want to, of course. You also have to consider that these organisations have overlapping mandates. They compete with each other to survive. The World Food Programme, for example, deals with food, but only as a wholesaler. The last mile, retail end, if you like, is conducted by their implementing partners, non-governmental organisations. They're also very expensive to run. WHO is slightly different, the World Health Organization, because they're funded by mandatory contribution. But the bottom line is that most UN country directors will tell you that their careers depend more on how much money they raise than how much good they achieve. We next want to consider governments. Governments, I'm afraid to say, are part of the problem as well as being part of the solution, as their money comes with rigid conditions attached, and these conditions are very different for each donor. But every receiving organisation has to comply with their standards, their timelines, their demands nevertheless. All of this is a duplication of effort and takes time. Donors will bleat about value for money, but at the same time, they'll impose unrealistic deadlines and reporting requirements, which tend to focus on measurable statistics. But we all know that in real life, not everything that counts can be counted. And all of this obliges their so-called partner NGOs to prioritize faster, more easily accessible, and more measurable activities with lower outcomes rather than focusing on what survivors really need. And lastly, let's look at the non-governmental sector. Fund those that you know about, that you're used to dealing with, or a local one. But if you're going to go with a local charity, then make sure that you've got third-party endorsement so that they are who they say they are. I'm afraid you do have to do some due diligence on this. Go with people you know. The NGO community includes, in this case, the Red Cross, and I would always use them as the default myself. In the UK, something interesting goes on with the Disasters and Emergencies Committee, the so-called DEC. This is popular with British donors because they recognise that in pooling resources, duplication of effort is minimised and fundraising overhead costs are reduced, and allocative efficiency, the goal of all of this, is enhanced. So my only question to you is, so why then do you not demand the same thing with the money that the government disperses on your behalf with your taxes? Sad to say, most material donations are inappropriate. If you donate medical supplies or clothes, for example, you'll probably be compounding the problem, not alleviating it. In-kind donations, including plastic sheets and blankets, sort of stuff that you think would be absolutely critical, end up being resold at vast discounts in local markets. Sending old unsorted shoes, clothes and medicines is nearly always a false economy and ends up having to be destroyed on site at considerable cost. In fact, this sort of donating is referred to as the second disaster by aid professionals. Medical consumables arrive often with less than 6 months to go before they expire. This not only contravenes international health regulations, but actually causes harm. Frequently, labels written in a language unknown to first responders and contain unapproved active ingredients. And I'm not just talking about your private donation, but about large volume donations from pharmaceutical companies too, who are only too happy to be making a charitable contribution, which can be written off against tax while making them look good to their employees and shareholders. All of this has to be destroyed, and in the case of pharmaceuticals, incinerated on site. Haluk Levent, a popular Turkish singer who founded a prominent local NGO in Turkey, tweeted 3 days after the earthquake in southern Turkey, "Please don't come to the region as volunteers," he said. "There are really a lot of people already here, and believe me, it may be more harmful than helpful. Professional teams, vehicles, heavy lifting equipment can come, but today is not the day for kind-hearted people that want to work as volunteers." So true. If you don't have relevant experience or particular technical expertise, volunteer from home. There's plenty you can do. And lastly, a word on field hospitals, which, when coming from abroad, have been criticised for their disproportionately high cost, for not offering appropriate services, and for arriving too late to make much of a difference. Instead, what's needed are helicopters for medevac, medical evacuation to nearby facilities which are less affected. And better still, the provision of mobile primary and secondary emergency medical teams. This is not to say that field hospitals and their staff are not wonderful things and great people, but we have to be aware of where your money is going, where it is most efficient, where it is most effective, and what is being done for largely political optics rather than saving lives on the ground. And finally, at least half of your donation, probably 2/3, will never reach the intended end user beneficiary. Now, I should point out this doesn't mean your money is wasted. It's just that it might be being spent on aspects of risk reduction and disaster management that are more about accountability than life-saving. It's just that you're not aware of it, and it's in nobody's interests to tell you about it because it might affect their fundraising. And of all the unpalatable truths about what some now call the philanthro-capitalist complex, this is probably the hardest to hear. But aid is big business nowadays. It's not charity. There's a time and a place for charity, but responding to a large-scale disaster is not the best place for it. Your money often passes through as many as 7 different organizations en route to the final beneficiary. There are overheads to pay back at headquarters. All those advocacy and lobbying staff have to be paid for. A lot of the rest goes on program support costs, i.e. not the product per se, but the process. including the hiring of expensive management consultants like me to write strategic operational reviews or conduct cost-benefit studies, carry out needs assessments and evaluations, emergency management appraisals, market appraisals, integrated joint rapid needs assessments, this kind of thing. All of which leads me to suggest that cash is usually best and is the best way of donating and is the most direct too. Now, this doesn't apply always, but where market systems can rebound quickly, as in Turkey, for example, this emergency support will quickly turn from soup kitchens to cash. And by cash, I mean digital transfers via mobile phones and debit cards, which recipients convert, as they always do, to cash at the first opportunity, probably through an ATM, which are mobilized across the affected area. Contrary to popular belief, cash is not wasted by its recipients, who know their needs best, and it provides much better value for money for the donor. Now, the benefits of cash over in-kind donations are clear. It's such a complex topic, I'll do a separate podcast about resilience of cash another time. But cash is preferred because it circulates in the local economy, exerting economic multiplier effects, which means that about 1/3 of which is resold at a considerable discount because it's inappropriate. That problem doesn't apply. But perhaps more importantly, cash confers dignity. It allows disaster-affected people to make their own choices according to their own priorities as soon as choice becomes available, which in a country like Turkey is pretty quickly because the market has the capacity to rebound quickly. Cash is trusted because it works, even when the electricity supply doesn't. Thank you. That was a quick run through where your money goes in times of disaster. It's a complex topic, and I've just raised 3 sort of major points. But for more detail on this kind of thing, just go to disasterwise.org and or read my book, Absolute Disasters, which you can find on Amazon. If you've got any questions or comments, you can use the contact form to get hold of me at disasterwise.org or listen to the chapters from Absolute Disaster as a form of audiobook. I should say that my producers have just asked me to say that everything I've expressed so far, these views are entirely my own. Anyway, I hope it was useful to you. Until the next time, keep safe.